welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and it's the 5th of April. And let me start off by inviting any and all of you who may be in the Denver, Colorado area. If you've got free time on Sunday, this coming Sunday, the day after tomorrow, or the day after you begin to hear this, Sunday, April 7th, from 1:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon, starting 1:30 p.m. This will be at the Mercury Cafe Theater. I'm told this is a political landmark, somehow similar to the Busboys and Poets or some such here in the D.C. area. But the Mercury Cafe Theater, 2199 California Street, Denver, Colorado, 80205. I'm going to be there as part of a panel with a number of others, and the general topic is the state of the alternative media. The point about this is that in Denver, and it's already going on, over these few days, we're going to have a large confab of alternative media types. And, of course, Amy Goodman will be there, right? Amy Goodman, of whom we have been quite critical. We've been critical in the past for issues having to do with things like 9/11. We're very critical today over support from the pro-war left for military adventures, destabilizations in Libya and Syria, which have led to tragic massacre, genocidal outcomes. And we're also concerned about the tendency of these same foundation-funded left libs to sell out the struggles of U.S. and European and other workers, that they can't get over their pro-austerity elitist bent. So there we have that. That's going to be on Sunday, April 7th, if you've got time, 1:30 in the afternoon, the Mercury Cafe Theater, 2199 California Street, Denver, Colorado. And if you can't make it, it's going to be streaming live. If you look at my website, tarpley.net, at tarpley.net, you will find a Facebook address where I am told, starting at 1:30 Mountain Time, Rocky Mountain time zone in Denver, starting at 1:30 Mountain Time on Sunday, you'll be able to hear the proceedings, gavel to gavel, right? Not just me, but others. And there will be other people on this agenda, and we're going to hear from a very distinguished organizer there out there in the Great Basin who's organizing the entire thing. So you tune in to that. Now, we, of course, are awaiting the hand that held the dagger is about to plunge it into the back of its benefactor, in this case. Obama is preparing to strike. Obama is preparing to attack the basis of the Democratic Party. He's going to announce a generalized assault on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, or some combination of those. This is a watershed event. This could be the end of the Democratic Party, or the beginning of the end of the Democratic Party. This is not how I want this to happen. We want the Republicans to collapse first, Obama. The Republicans should collapse first. Revert to that reviled, regional, reactionary, racist party that can't elect presidents, but only a bunch of yahoos and hayseeds, hicks and hacks, as we hear in the Lincoln movie, sending hicks and hacks to the House of Representatives. But we then want, of course, the Democratic Party to split into two parts, a Wall Street Democrat and a populist or pro-labor or progressive or something like that, Democrats. We'll figure out the names on the way, but you do get the idea. If the Democrats collapse first, we go into permanent austerity dictatorship under the Republicans. And once the Republicans take over the White House, you can pretty much use it as a rule of thumb from now on. Any Republican administration will be your last free vote, because once they're in power, they will pack the Supreme Court, bust unions, use the Justice Department, throw their full weight into the scales. You'll never have a free election after that in the United States, and you will then be nailed to the cross of killer austerity. So it's important for the Democratic Party not to collapse. And, of course, more important in the immediate is it's important not to carry out genocide against your own people. Obama's budget is now scheduled for next Wednesday, April 10th. I believe that's the calendar. Next Wednesday, April 10th. That's going to be the hand that held the dagger. And he's going to attack with the chained consumer price index and other totally unacceptable killer cuts. This is genocidal austerity. These are savings that will kill. They will kill Americans with this. And there is no reason for it. It's absolutely indefensible. And now we will test the moral and intellectual fiber of a whole range of personalities. Will they attack Obama head on and tell him, look, Obama, take that back or you're headed for early impeachment? There's a clique in the House of Representatives that would love to impeach him. Right now, they don't feel strong enough. But if he begins to attack his own base in this way, we're headed for some pretty unpredictable events. Now, you may argue, well, Clinton did the same thing. Clinton wiped out part of the Social Security Act by ending welfare as we've known it. Yes, this, of course, was a major crime, but it did not have the broad impact. Remember, Medicare and Social Security get 80% support in any honest poll because everybody but everybody fears or thinks or expects, has some idea they may need that someday, and when they need it, they really need it. So Obama's going to be attacking. Bush tried to do the same thing. Remember, in Bush's second term, he wanted to privatize. Obama won't say privatize. Obama will say gut it from within, let it die on the vine, the death of 1,000 cuts. So time to gird your loins to fight and get those left liberals, put them on the spot, get the Krugmans of this world. Are you going to go onto a full attack mode against these killer cuts and any politician, even if it's the telegenic Obama, time to attack on that front. And, of course, the reactionary Republicans, with their fascist ideology, they will be saying, oh, no, it's not enough. Now, we want to talk about this in some detail. We'll also be looking at the U.S. States. But now we have to look at this Korean Peninsula. Are we facing some kind of Gulf of Tonkin 50 years or so, 49 years, after the first one? Some kind of Gulf of Tonkin may be in the air. There may be an electronic Gulf of Tonkin, cyber warfare, going on right now, and we would hardly know it until after the fact. What we seem to see is a pattern of, what can we call it, U.S. and ROK, Republic of Korea, South Korea, provocation, in the sense that sending a nuclear-capable stealth bomber or two flying over the Korean Peninsula in the midst of these exercises, I think we're dealing with Ulchi focus lens, or I think that's the usual one, the yearly one. Used to be anyway. We've got this stealth bomber or two of them flying over South Korea, and North Korea has gone bonkers. Now, North Korea, of course, you can laugh all you want. This is the Hermit Kingdom. This is a kind of it's a version of the Stalinist Russian trappings of a regime. Nevertheless, it's better to leave these people alone. It's better to let them evolve out of this. And right now they're in a very sensitive phase because of the new and untested leader, Kim Jong-un, who, fresh back from his studies in a Swiss boarding school or so, is attempting to consolidate power. It's not a good time to bait him or mock him, especially because he's sending messages he wants to negotiate. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Remember, you can see me in Denver, Colorado, this coming Sunday, 1:30 in the afternoon at the Mercury Theater Cafe in downtown Denver. Get all the details at the Twitter feed, Webster G. Tarpley, or the website mine, that is the tarpley.net. And remember, you should always be keeping in touch with the United Front Against Austerity, because now, with Obama about to attack the entitlements, Obama's war against Franklin D. Roosevelt, right? What's it going to be? Who's more powerful, Franklin D. Roosevelt or Obama? I say Franklin D. Roosevelt. Rally to the New Deal and dump Obama if necessary. Scare the hell out of him. Make him understand that his pretty face didn't win that election, but that was a lot of working people. And as you can see, there's a growing awareness. Obama campaigned on the idea that he was going to defend entitlements, and now he wants to attack them. This is bankrupt. It won't be tolerated. And if he insists on doing this, a gaping hole in his line opens up where the fascist or Republicans can attack him and at least impeach him, and maybe even more, because once Eric Holder is out of there, there's a backlog of scandals that Holder is keeping at bay. But once he's gone, that could really change. Back now to the Korean Peninsula, though. The events Thursday was a wild day. Yesterday, right? So we have this backlog of events. The U.S. stealth bomber flies over the Korean Peninsula. What a piece of insanity that is, right? That's like saying, let's send a bunch of bombers over Cuba in the midst of the Cuban Missile Crisis and see what happens. It's practically a provocation. I can smell Operation Northwoods in the air. The Gulf of Tonkin, which is the plan for the Operation Northwoods, is the plan for that. That's also in the air. In the course of yesterday, the State Department briefing, Madame Nuland, wife of a leading neocon, as we found out, is talking about cooling, time to cool it off, but maybe too late. Today, the DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, the Pyongyang regime, the DPRK says to Russia, please begin to evacuate your diplomatic personnel, and they've done this to other embassies, including the British, and some of them are indeed in the course of leaving. The North, DPRK, sends a couple of missiles to their own East Coast. I mean, 2 missiles on a couple of launchers. Big deal, but somehow that gets blown out of proportion. There is an interesting body of opinion that one electromagnetic pulse detonation by the DPRK could at least cripple significant amount of the communications in Japan, but that would also cripple North Korea, South Korea, parts of China. So that would have a significant effect. And maybe this points us into the area that we're now going into. Let's look a little bit about the world, right? We've just had the Putin-Xi summit, right? The new leader of China, President Xi, is now fully ensconced and installed in power, goes to meet Putin, a whole series of energy deals. Russia is now the main energy supplier, or will be, of China. This is all overland. This is guaranteed. The Royal Navy, U.S. Navy, can't do much about it. That's a big problem for the Anglo-Americans. The other one, of course, is the BRICS summit we've just had: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and the BRICS International Development Bank, right? We mentioned it last week, $50 billion. That's a seed crystal, at least. That's a pilot project. It's a worthy and indispensable goal, right? Ultimately, it's the ball game, right? It's the idea of having the beginnings of an international monetary system based on development and not looting by the City of London and Wall Street. We can also add into the equation the U.S. leaving Iraq, leaving Afghanistan. We're told, the Washington Post put it on the front page a couple of days ago, that the U.S. clout in Iraq over the Maliki regime. Maliki, originally a U.S. puppet, installed with the help of the U.S., although they really wanted the previous president to remain in power. This Maliki is there, and the U.S. can't get anything from him. Karzai of Afghanistan continues to do what he wants. So whenever you have an empire that is pulling back, right, they're in retreat. I'm thinking in particular of 1975 when the U.S. was essentially forced out of South Vietnam finally. You immediately get the Maya Gez, right, a big raid to recover a merchant ship. This is, I think, I would call it the Maya Gez reflex, in addition to these other things, which are bigger and more immediate. So what might they be doing? Is the U.S. attempting to goad North Korea into an insane gesture of attack? What's going on behind the scenes? We saw this basketball diplomacy, right? In the case of China, many decades ago, we had ping-pong diplomacy. Now we have basketball diplomacy. Dennis Rodman, I believe, a basketball star, I'm told, goes over there and meets with Kim Jong-un, who loves basketball, sends back a message, let's avoid war. I'm not as bad as you think. Call me up and we'll negotiate. And I think that's an opening you'd want to take. My program for this situation, just to get that out there, what must the U.S. do? First of all, as little as Kennedy would send bombers over Berlin during the Berlin crisis of 1961 or 62, as little as Kennedy would send, fleets of B-52s into the Caribbean in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, at least not that close to Cuba. Stop with these provocations. Stop the maneuvers. Whatever these maneuvers are, they can wait. You're not a banana republic. You're the United States. Nobody needs to be convinced of your ability to blow everybody's head off. That's beyond question. Stop these maneuvers. Be magnanimous. If you're a great power, act like one, not some jittery little tin pot regime, which is often what we seem to have. Halt the maneuvers. Stop the provocations. No more stealth bombers. No more showing off in this regard. And then start some bilateral talks. Pick a place in Geneva. Start at a decent level, say Assistant Secretary of State level. Start negotiating. And eventually you can have a de facto recognition, right? Do we think that the DPRK regime is the de facto, that is the actual, whether you like it or not, whether they're legitimate or not, whether they're a rogue state or not, are they the actual functioning government of this piece of land, North Korea? They are. And if they want to have a peace treaty to end the Korean War 60 years after the Panmunjom armistice, 60 years since Panmunjom, then give them that too. What does that cost you? What's the big deal? We don't want a war over this, or maybe somebody does, and we'll go into that in just a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. More on this Korean crisis. The UK, in the last 24 hours, the Cameron regime, number 10 Downing Street, is attempting to use the tensions around this situation to get the funding they need to begin replacing the British Trident nuclear submarines, which are the basis of their nuclear deterrent. They want to go beyond the Tridents. They got to modernize all that. They're on their way to needing 100 million pounds, and the cost. 100 billion pounds. It's 100 billion pounds to renew the nuclear deterrent. So they're attempting to take advantage of this situation. Obama has placed ABM launchers of the United States in Alaska. No resistance. Left libs are quiescent. Nothing in particular going on. In addition, we've got the Aegis cruisers on display, right? The Aegis cruisers, or destroyers too, are seagoing phased array radars and PARs, right, as they're called. And those are now in the waters, say the South China Sea and perhaps even the Yellow Sea, to shoot down eventual missiles coming from North Korea. And we've also got the THAAD, right, the Terminal High Altitude Anti-Missile Defense. That's in Guam, right? There are batteries of anti-ballistic missiles that go with that. So we've never heard so much and seen so much about ABM. And what it seems to do is it allows the U.S. and the British to say, we're going to gear up our ABM here and our nuclear deterrence. And we can say, oh, it's not Russia, it's not China, it's just these crazy people out here. And I'm sure that is not lost on Moscow and Beijing. So we're getting a kind of military mobilization going on. I should have added, among the aggravating factors, along with the new Chinese government, the BRICS Development Bank, and so forth, we've also now got a skull and bones Secretary of State. And I looked to me like I was one of the very few who pointed attention to this, right? That Skull and Bones has a record. And you'd say, well, you know, that Kerry, he's just an effete snob. He's a blasé patrician. He's nothing. Well, Skull and Bones is as Skull and Bones does. And what they do is war. They are one-trick ponies as much as any neocon when you get right down to it. So, suppose the Anglo-Americans are contemplating a war. Suppose they want to say, well, let's get North Korea to attack. What happened? South Korea is clobbered. Well, then that removes South Korea in whole or in part as an economic competitor, wrecks them, sets them back. Japan will also be damaged, and the net result of all of it is to force these countries closer and closer to the United States. More and more U.S. domination of them, to the extent that North Korea rattles the rockets. So you'd be also forcing Xi into a loss of face, right? Because what are you going to do about it? We're going to carpet bomb North Korea, and what are you going to do about it? And that's going to go right up to the Yalu, right up to your border, as it did these 60 years ago. We've also got cyber warfare going on in the background. South Korea under attack from that. And remember, Madame Park, the new president, daughter of the famous Chung-hee Park, right, the dictator of several decades back, she was talking rapprochement. She was talking normalization. So there may be an effort to imprison her within the cage of fruitless and useless and antiquated, absurd and obsolete confrontation and division. So all of that together, with Skull and Bones running the show, and Obama, of course, a weakling, this is not good. So again, stop the maneuvers, stop the provocations. No more stealth planes over the Korean Peninsula. Start some bilateral talks. North Korea wants bilateral talks. That's fine. You can go towards the exchange of ambassadors. Why not? And start some kind of a negotiation towards a peace treaty, since it's now 60 years since the war ended, July 1953. It'll soon be 60 years. Why don't we relegate that one to the dustbin of history? And don't try to use this as a gambit to wreck and disrupt the BRICS and the South Korean economic miracle, and indeed trying to wreck the Japanese economy, because it would do all of those things, and it would put tremendous pressure on the Chinese government and create some real problems for Russia as well, because it would then be assuming that North Korea got clobbered, which I think is likely, although they would do tremendous damage, that would then put a U.S. puppet state right up against China, and they would not like that. Now, the Skull and Bones foreign policy marches on. We've now got Kerry and the death squad leaders, right, the Syrian death squad bosses, are now explicitly and with arrogance and blatantly contemplating the idea of a buffer zone, a cordon sanitaire for inside Syria, right? They want to seize a part of Syria's national territory and establish there a safe haven for terrorists. And, of course, they don't put it that way. They say, oh, what we're doing is what we're doing for the sake of the wonderful refugees that need to be helped, right? Here we have Washington Post, Wednesday, April 3rd. U.S. and Jordan are stepping up the training of the Syrian opposition. So we've got camps, training camps. We're getting, basic training, 90-day wonders, and I'm sure officer training also for death squad members who want to go into Syria and fight. And we've even got a map of the buffer zone areas. Now, the buffer zone areas that we see in the Washington Post map, one of them starts at the Golan Heights and parallels the border between Syria and Jordan, but it's inside Syria. And the other one is out where Syria, Jordan, and Iraq meet. There's another safe zone for refugees, but in reality for terrorists. Now, what does this mean? In order to have such zones, you have to have air superiority over the zones. So in order to have air superiority over the zones, you've got to have a no-fly zone over most of Syria. Therefore, you've got to bomb Syria. This is a recipe for a bombing campaign against Syria. Now, what would the Russian response be to such a bombing campaign? Never expect a direct response, but do expect some indirect response, at least I think. Because if you don't, you're going to create problems for Putin, right? If he simply lets this go by, then that's a loss of face for him. So Xi under pressure in the Far East, Putin under pressure in the Middle East. I would say if you look now at the catalog of hotspots or areas of grave tension in the world today, right, the crisis points, we've got the Korean Peninsula number one. We've got Syria number two for this increased activism and interventionism by Skull and Bones Kerry and company, he being, of course, the face man for this effort. And then you've got Iran, and we've got, supposedly this is the year when the Iran nuclear dossier, says Netanyahu, strutting and pompously threatening. This is when the Syrian dossier has got to be resolved, right? So we've got all these accusations that the number of centrifuges are working overtime, and on and on and on. So you put that together, that's a possible scenario for an aggressive campaign by a moribund imperialism. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now we're going to shift away from foreign policy, compelling as it is. We just got to remember before we do, the U.S. policy remains the destruction of the modern nation state. And if you're anti-government, you got to search your conscience because you're on the main imperialist line. U.S. policy says, let us smash the modern nation state, which grew out of the Visconti regime in Milan starting about 1310 with that famous meeting of including Dante and the Holy Roman Emperor and the original Visconti. Let's smash all of that, right? 7 to 8 centuries of hard work out the window. And instead, let's have failed states, rump states, mini-states, micro-states, chaos, warlords. So for the Middle East and Africa, we've had the Arab Spring. We're now getting the guerrilla warfare projected across the Sahara and the Sahel. And in the Far East, we're getting something along the same lines. So no surprise. Now, economics. As we said, Obama is preparing to attack the entitlements. And this is a piece of infamy beyond belief, except if you've been following Obama. And it is ironic now. Remember, Woodrow Wilson in 1916 ran on a campaign saying he kept us out of war. And within a month after being inaugurated, he sent a message to the Congress demanding war against Germany and Austria-Hungary, the central powers, the central empires of World War I. What happened to the Democratic Party and the general U.S. political climate Not only because of that, but after that, and with that being a factor, the long reactionary nightmare, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, all of them controlled by Andrew Mellon, the satanic financier. We've just had the whitewash of Coolidge by Calamity Schlaze. I hope we'll actually get to that maybe in this program. If not this week, then next. Calamity Schlaze telling you that Silent Cal Coolidge was a great guy and just the thing for now. Well, fascism started on his watch in Italy and elsewhere. And then we remember Lyndon B. Johnson, right, 1964, ran against Goldwater, saying Goldwater's a warmonger. Vote for me. And I'm not a warmonger. Well, he turned out to be the helpless puppet of the Harvard boutique and the Skull and Bones boutique of the Bundys and Dean Rusk and the rest of them, the warmongers of Vietnam. And the result of that was the end of the New Deal cycle, 1932 to 1968. That was LBJ's doing, unfortunately. He not only destroyed his own presidency, but he essentially destroyed a cycle of Democratic Party domination, which had produced the best results of any in American history, bar none. The New Deal, above all. So he basically broke that up. Now, with Obama, this is the danger. Obama thinks that he walks on water, I guess, that his telegenic smile and sparkling rhetoric and messianic and utopian, as we've always said, that these are going to carry the day. He is desperately dealing the demagogy of gun control, and I'm here to denounce the gun fetishists 6 ways to Sunday. I think they're pathetic. I think they're pitiful. But Obama, as a demagogue, is using this as a wedge issue. And we've also got wedge issue demagogy going on gay marriage issue and related issues and gun control. So we got 3 prongs of wedge issues. All of this designed to cover the economic bankruptcy of both parties. And one of the things it's doing is dividing the United States in a way which is not good, which is perhaps something that will cause some permanent weakening of certain parts of the polity here. We don't need this. Stop with the wedge issues. Demagogues on both sides, stop it. But now we have to fight the economic issue, which is the thing that they're seeking to cover up. So we're waiting for Obama's budget. You know, we went through last week the genocide of the Rand-Paul budget, the equally or almost equal genocide of the Ryan budget. We've seen the well-meaning attempt by the Progressive Caucus in the House, but since they don't have the Wall Street sales tax in its full vigor, that is a great flaw. And then the Patty Murray budget passed by the Senate, which certainly has some positive features, but ultimately does not give you a recovery. In none of these is there any idea of an economic recovery, full employment, the 30 million well-paid jobs that we absolutely need. Now, we're told that Representative Keith Ellison is going to resubmit his bill for the Wall Street sales tax this coming week. And we note with some satisfaction that now Italy, France, and Hungary have imposed a Euro-Tobin. They've got a small tax on securities turnover. The Italian one even has a tiny extra tax, a surtax, on high-frequency trading, flash trading, program trading of this rapid-fire variety. So that's what's coming up, and that will be the big effort now for the next couple of months, to stop that in its tracks. It can be done. It was done against Mad Dog Bush when he was at the height of his power in 2005, and it can be done with Obama, who is much, much weaker in a number of ways. And again, the tragedy of all this is Obama has no economic recovery program. And the administration is even hostile to the idea that you need one. He had the stimulus. He had the supplemental. He's had the Dodd-Frank. That's not working. Okay, so the other thing we've got to look at are these situations, right? Detroit remains the main front. I put a major article up on the website earlier this week about Detroit. Take a look at that. That's the entire story. Interesting to see. Governor Snyder comes from Gateway Computer. Isn't that something? All of these sort of autistic, computer-driven types, from Bill Gates to Gian Roberto Casaleggio, the Svengali of Grillo in Italy. A lot of these cybernetic types, the autistic, computer-driven ones, turn out to be the worst reactionaries, the worst throwbacks to the barbarism of the robber barons. Okay, so that's Detroit. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. This is an interesting story. We have to divide the United States now between the lucky places where cities and towns can declare bankruptcy based on their own needs. Those are the lucky ones in Obama's world. And the unlucky ones are states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where you have to get the approval of the governor to declare bankruptcy. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, tried to declare bankruptcy. It is the state capital of Pennsylvania. It's a few miles up the road from here in Washington. It's the Susquehanna River goes through it. And right now, take a look at the coverage. You wouldn't believe it. It looks like Berlin, 1945. There are craters. It's a moonscape. It looks like the demilitarized zone in 1973. Craters. These are sinkholes. 41 sinkholes have occurred now in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, as a result of the groundwater from the Susquehanna River, which is a large river, right? It's the one that then flows into the top of Chesapeake Bay. It actually has two branches, right? It goes up to New York State. They meet at Sunbury, New York, I think, and come down, and there are now these sinkholes in Harrisburg. Harrisburg is too poor to deal with 41 sinkholes. They tried to declare bankruptcy, and the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett, space cadet, came back from space long enough to say, no, you're not allowed to. You've got to keep suffering and keep paying those bondholders. Well, it's time for mayors to simply do a do-it-yourself debt moratorium and let Tom Corbett be damned. And we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Just one further note on the domestic economic front. Detroit under austerity dictatorship. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, not allowed to go bankrupt when it's got 41 sinkholes that it can't fill. Keep paying the bondholders, says Tom Corbett, space cadet, the governor of Pennsylvania. And now we've got Stockton, California. Let's look at this. This is it's probably the largest municipal bankruptcy so far. This is ground zero for the real estate bubble, right? The Wall Street zombie bankers and hedge fund hyenas had driven up the price of homes. With the bursting of the bubble, inevitably, the price of a home in Stockton, California has gone down by 44%. This attacks the real estate tax base. Of course, 1 in 30 homes has gone into sequestration, into being foreclosed on. So Stockton needs bankruptcy, and fortunately, they seem to be getting it thanks to a federal judge. The federal judge says the creditors of Stockton, California, are acting in bad faith. The creditors are saying you've got to transfer more of the income of the city to the predatory creditors, and the public and services and human life be damned. In particular, there's a payment of almost $1 billion, which Stockton owes to CalPERS, the Public Employees Retirement Fund, and there's an attempt to grab that money by these predators. It's likely that in this case, the creditors will be lucky to get 17 cents on the dollar. Yeah, fine. That's what unfortunately has to happen. San Bernardino, California, also following on the path to bankruptcy. The advantage here is that the California state laws seem to be much better, although the creditors will now attempt to go to federal court and say, override, oh justices, the laws of California. We want our money. And here we'll see again, when push comes to shove, those reactionaries, the rats cabal, Roberts, Alito, Thomas, Scalia, with perhaps Kennedy floating in, swinging in as he sometimes does, will they say, no, states' rights be damned when the funding for creditors and fat cats is at stake? We override it, as of course they did in Bush v. Gore in a slightly different context. In the background, we've got the Mercatus Center, funded by the infamous Koch brothers, the notorious Koch brothers at George Mason University. Mercatus Center has an index of freedom, and they find that in terms of economic freedom and other freedom, New York is the least free state. Virginia is free. Maryland, not free. You get the picture. And how about this, comparing even New Jersey and New York? In New York, I just discovered this week, you can get food stamps and other benefits at a much lower, at a much higher income level than you can in New Jersey because of the Garden State Goering. Let's not go along with the Obama administration whitewash of Chris Christie. He remains the Garden State answer to Hermann Goering, Reichsmarschall. So with Christie, you've got to be practically, completely destitute with not a penny in order to qualify for food stamps. In New York, it's slightly better. But, of course, according to the Mercatus Center, that means less freedom. There's less freedom to starve to death in New York than there is in New Jersey. So we've also got this push going on for public-private partnerships. And what that means is the failure of the federal government to build infrastructure or to do it my way through the Federal Reserve, that will mean big tolls. We had an episode about this here, the so-called Dulles Greenway, where they're still attempting to get people to pay the huge toll that they've imposed. So Stockton needs to go into bankruptcy. But then again, with bankruptcy, Detroit needs bankruptcy. Harrisburg needs bankruptcy. They've got to stop all payments on interest and principal, 5 years and or the duration of the depression. That should be a federal law that says that's an available option. But then, where are you going to get the money? It's got to be the Wall Street sales tax, because this stuff is largely on budget. When you're talking about meeting payroll and providing street lighting, street repair, health services, and other things in cities, that's got to come out of the actual budget. Ultimately, the U.S. Treasury budget replenished using the Wall Street sales tax and related reforms to get Wall Street to pay their fair share. So the real drama continues to go on in the states. And a lot of our heroes at the left liberal alternative media fair have not been doing too good a job in terms of bringing public attention to those battles, because those are embarrassing to Obama that such things go on, and his Justice Department doesn't do anything to intervene. In Detroit, we got a whole new form of government, right? The emergency manager. He's a dictator. He's got legislative and executive powers in the hands of one person. He can fire, he can loot, he can hire, he can do anything he wants. Where are the libertarians? Where's the Michigan militia, we might add, asking ourselves, are they mobilizing politically to stop this kind of outrage? So this whole argument we hear that, the Second Amendment is a guarantee for all your other rights. Yeah, what if the gun fetishists turn out to be scabs and strikebreakers and indeed proto-fascists who want to help these Republican governors crush labor and crush the minorities in the cities? All right. Now let's look at the world economic picture. Here's where things get very, very tense. The world economy now is looking more turbulent. I did a review of this at the end of last year. You can see that up at tarpley.net. But now we've had the first quarter, and things are looking decidedly more turbulent. Remember, the time frame is this: 1929, New York stock market crash. 1931, European banking panic. going from Austria to Germany to the British default of September 21st, 1931. 1933, depression hits bottom in many countries. 1937, though, double dip in the United States, the second dip. Why? Because the Roosevelt administration, pressed by Henry the Morgenthau and other bad influences, right? Wall Street influences, there's no way around it, and the emergence of a Southern Democrat anti-Roosevelt group in the Senate, were able to impose some budget cuts and a capital strike by the reactionary billionaires, right? This was denounced by Harold Ickes and by Robert Jackson, right? That there was a deliberate capital strike, a refusal to invest and create jobs for political and economic reasons by a cabal of the super rich. Now, this time around, 2008, New York derivatives panic, London derivatives panic, reaching back into 2007. European banking crisis breaks out in 2010 because of the lack of political maturity. This is disguised as a sovereign debt crisis. It's a European banking panic, as we've seen again now. We don't know when this depression will hit bottom. Certainly it has not yet. And then the question of the double dip for the United States, a large, important question. Britain, of course, already in triple dip, others in double dip. Now, we've just had the report on U.S. job creation. Oh, we hear Limbaugh, the Institute of Retarded Reactionary Ranting. Limbaugh says the United States is a dying economy. How about that? Only 88,000 new jobs created in March. The labor force has now shrunk to the size of 1979. So that is a serious situation. A lot of it has to do with the sequester. A lot of it has to do with the caps that were imposed already in mid-2011. Austerity is taking its toll. This may be the U.S. double dip caused by killer cuts and genocidal austerity. Back in a minute. World Crisis Radio. We are looking at the international economic picture. So we're now going to see a decline in job creation as we see the reverse multiplier go into effect. It is the sequester to a very large degree, but it also goes back to the caps that were part of the Satan sandwich of August 2011, extorted by the reactionary Republicans and eagerly accepted by Obama. Obama could have said, sorry, boys, 14th Amendment, take your blackmail and shove it. He didn't want to because he wanted the cuts, and he'll prove that again next week, according to most reports. U6 unemployment, 15%, right? People who would like to work but have given up given up in discouragement and despair. That's factored into those that are still working. Now, of course, when somebody like Limbaugh at the Institute of Retarded Reactionary Ranting goes into this, he's basically saying, cut all social services, liquidate, let it burn out. Well, no. The true result is augment your social services, preserve your labor force, don't kill people, keep them alive, train them, make them healthy, and then get a recovery program, the New Deal recovery program. The Republicans hate it, and Obama hates it as much or more. So no killer cuts. This is, of course, the platform of the United Front Against Austerity, UFAA. Go to the website, Against Austerity. Now, we have some attempts around the world to get out of the Depression. European Union unemployment is now 12%, and factoring it in, it's much more. And remember, German unemployment is actually larger than most other countries because a lot of it is masked through the Hartz program, H-A-R-T-Z, a Volkswagen executive who found ways to hide the unemployed, just keeping them alive and keeping them in despair, but not having an economic recovery. So that's one way to do it. Now, the news this week is Japan. Japan plans a hot money splurge. Japan is saying that they're going to double their money supply. They're going to put out $500 billion in asset purchases. This is most likely purchasing toxic derivatives from the Japanese zombie banks. And remember, zombie bank is a term that got going in Japan in the latter part of the 1990s as a result of a banking system that had been zombified by bad real estate investments, right? And nobody was willing to bite the bullet to break up these banks, to declare them insolvent, to put them through Chapter 11 or Chapter 7, as the case may be, reorganize them or triage them out of existence. So the Bank of Japan Governor Kuroda says that these are extreme methods for extreme situations. Doubling the money supply, similar to the maneuver of the U.S. Federal Reserve between September 2008 and May 2009. One of their problems, of course, a shrinking labor force because of lack of immigration. If you have immigration, count your blessings. Thank your lucky stars. You have people who are willing to come to the United States and work here. Welcome them. Make them all citizens within a year. Get this off the table, right? We're told by Lindsey Graham that it has to be a painful calvary of 15 years to become a citizen. Absolute insanity. Gear up your labor force. Get people educated, trained, assimilated. Get them working. Get them into high-value, high-capital intensity, and well-paid jobs. Otherwise, how are you going to compete with the rest of the world? So the Japanese have therefore gone down the road of competitive devaluation. The yen has declined 3% on Thursday, 25% over the last few months. This is a method pioneered by the British after September 1931. The British policy under Ramsay MacDonald and later under Stanley Baldwin was competitive devaluation. Read all about it in Surviving the Cataclysm, first or second editions. Anyone you can get has the entire story about this. It's a way to export the Depression and so forth. Japan has functioned as a kind of liquidity pump for the world, now even more so. The problem with this is, where does the hot money go? You make all this money available, right? $500 billion U.S. in fairly short order. Is that going to flow into plant and equipment, productive investment, new jobs, new infrastructure? Generally speaking, no. It's going to rush out of the yen and to the biggest hot money market in the world. Maybe people will borrow from the Bank of Japan and buy bitcoins. You know, we've seen non-sophisticated, low-information investors from the Far East buy a lot of crazy things, right? Back in previous decades. Suppose the Japanese say, oh, the hottest speculative market is the Bitcoin, the well-known Ponzi scheme, and the Japanese then invest in that. You see what the problem is. Problem with Bitcoin is obviously that it's a Ponzi scheme. It may go up for a while, but I can see the end already. Gold, by the way, gold will not go to nothing, right? If you're wondering what to do, and I'm not saying this to please anybody, forget about Bitcoin. Think about some gold. Gold will have its ups and downs. Gold will take you for a wild ride. But if you have a little bit of money and you're concerned now, given the post-Cyprus and all this, if that's really your concern, then gold will not go to zero. The Bitcoin may well. But now, look, remember the typology from Germany, say, in the 1930s, or the United States at the same time. What are the four things a government can do? Well, one is to have an immediate deflationary crash, the Andrew Mellon technique, which is liquidate stocks, liquidate bonds, liquidate labor, liquidate the farmer, liquidate real estate, liquidate everything. Andrew Mellon then, and Heinrich Brüning then, and Rand Paul, more or less, today, right? Pull out all the stops. Mike Lee, the Tea Party method, and then there'll be a recovery, right? Let it all burn itself out, right? Let's have the panic of 1920-21, right? The one that gave us Mussolini and fascism. Great. Problem is it doesn't work. It's never happened that way. Hot money is number two. Just flood your system with cheap cash, liquidity injections all over the place. What the problem with that is that does not flow into the areas that make a recovery. It won't flow into capital goods because the rate of profit in such productive endeavors in a depression combined with speculative bubble in some areas, the profit will always be less in the productive investment area. So you've got to retilt the playing field back in favor of productive investment. The Wall Street sales tax would help, but the hot money method generally won't work. And then there are two more, and we'll tell you those when we return. And we'll come back to World Crisis Radio. Remember, you can get a lecture from me in Denver, Colorado this coming Sunday. That's April 7th at the Mercury Theater Cafe, 1:30 in the afternoon. Check Tarpley, Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed, tarpley.net for further details. You can find it at some other websites also. And concerning now the Japanese hot money policy, competitive devaluation, right? Called currency war. Well, currency wars were declared by the U.S. and the British against the euro in 2009. So that's been going on for quite a while. The four possibilities, again, are immediate deflationary crash, the Andrew Mellon or Paul Tard approach. Hot money, pump it. Problem is, it doesn't get you to capital goods recovery. It flows into speculative markets, and it will weaken your currency. In the case of Japan, that's part of the goal, but it's still not enough. It won't give you a recovery. Consumer stimulus is the other one. The stimulus here, the supplemental, think of Nancy Pelosi, right? It does some good. It has some effect if you put in some extra money to pay for teachers and policemen and firemen and other municipal workers, state workers, and so forth. That has an anti-cyclical effect. In other words, it tends to make the depression less severe, but you're still in a depression. And the problem with that is once that money runs out, which it will, especially if it's on budget as it is, then that comes to an end, which is what we're seeing now in the U.S., right? Some of the downturn, the undertow in the U.S. economy right now is the lack of the stimulus. The stimulus had some positive effect, although not as much bang for the buck as we could have gotten it through other methods. Now, the fourth is the Holy Grail. The fourth is the Lautenbach-Voitinsky method, where you go to the richest part of your government, the central bank, you nationalize it in whole or in part, and you say, you, Ben Bernanke, you, Federal Reserve, you will finance the recovery. The federal budget can't do it. The zombie banks can't do it. You're what's left, which is good because you have more money than anybody. You have infinite money if you want to. You are going to put out a $3.6 trillion tender offer right now for 100-year, 0% coupon bonds to build the infrastructure of the United States. And you know the list. We have to get on the way to 30 million jobs. You do that, you get an actual economic recovery, especially if you tidy up your derivatives by banning some of them. And remember, you've got to use your Wall Street sales tax to stabilize your federal budget so you keep all of your essential social safety net programs going. And you have revenue sharing left over for California, Stockton, for Detroit, for Harrisburg, for rebuilding the New York, New Jersey area, at least for emergency relief. The rebuilding actually goes on the Federal Reserve tab. So I would also point out what we're detecting more and more. One of the features of neo-fascism is an animus against infrastructure, a hatred of infrastructure. We've seen this in the case of Governor Christie, refusing to build that tunnel under the Hudson River at Weehawken, I believe. Cuccinelli, the reactionary, extreme reactionary, running for governor of Virginia, made his career saying, we don't want to pay for infrastructure. The whole Tea Party, and of course the right-wing demagogue, the neo-fascist Beppe Grillo. Now, the question of the hot money is the center of this screed by David Stockman. Remember Stockman, he was a bean counter in the Reagan administration. He noted that when Reagan insisted on cutting taxes for the rich, even though he covered that over by increasing the Social Security payroll tax to finance the tax cuts for the rich with the help of Greenspan. David Stockman, back in the early 80s, pointed to the fact that Reagan was tripling the national debt, which, of course, is what he did. Now, Stockman is now back telling us that we're going to have the end of the current hot money binge by the Federal Reserve. And it's plausible to some extent, although this is not the main event. The main event is what's happening with unemployment, what's happening with your labor force. But he wants to remind you that even though the stock market has now peaked, right? We've had the Dow Jones at all-time highs. We've had the Standard & Poor's finally catching up. The NASDAQ has not caught up and will not be catching up because of the peak back there in the dot-com bubble. But he reminds us we should be afraid. We should be very afraid. Over the past 13 years, the stock market has twice crashed and touched off a recession, read depression in the second case. American households lost $5 trillion in the dot-com bust and $7 trillion in the 2007 housing crash, and, of course, even more. Sooner or later, within a few years, I predict the latest Wall Street bubble, inflated by an egregious flood of phony money from the Federal Reserve rather than real economic gains, will explode also. So he's not happy with the QE3 hot money, the purchases of toxic derivatives by the Fed. So here's the word, again, to both of them, to Governor Kuroda of the Bank of Japan and to Helicopter Ben Bernanke here at the Fed. Open a credit stimulus window, U.S. $3.6 trillion, great figure, comes from the prestigious American Society of Civil Engineers. Rebuild the entire infrastructure. That's for starters, right? The real deficit is bigger, but start with that, and you'll get a recovery. And similarly for Japan. By now, the bullet train and other investments from the 60s and 70s are needing replacement. And remember, you don't have to do it all in country. You can also do this in areas that you want to develop, right? You can do this in certain favored overseas markets. All right. Now, the thesis of the reactionary Republicans is that the sequester, cutting 10% out of selected programs in the domestic discretionary realm of the federal budget, that this has absolutely no effect, right? That's what the Republicans will tell you. It has absolutely no effect. Anybody who tells you it has an effect is lying, right? It has no effect. The government does nothing, so you can cut 10%, you can cut even more, has no effect. It's a big lie. It's a damn lie. Here we go. Washington Post on a recent Friday, March 22nd. On a Montana Indian reservation, the sequester is hitting hard. The schools at Fort Peck, Montana, they're going to lose teachers, counselors, and other school services. Summer school, which gives you lunch and something to do, will be cut. This is a school system where 5 children have committed suicide in a single year and 20 more have attempted suicide. You got to have some counselors just to keep people going. The jobs, of course, are the key. But it's a disgrace, and that's being cut, okay? Montana, Fort Peck, Montana, the Indian reservation is getting ripped off. Now, we talked last week about the university funding $1 billion hole from the federal government, and in particular, this is a number of fields. We're now hearing that the total U.S. federal budget, which goes to private contractors, right? It's all grants, was about $150 billion in previous years. It's now down to $140 billion as a result in part of the Satan sandwich, and it's headed for $130 billion. This is absolutely criminal. And we've got I have a whole pile here of stories. Students, we got 1,300 kids at the University of District of Columbia can't get a grant. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Hurrying, just let me go through one or two more points in this catalog. We got about 1,500 kids at the University of the District of Columbia that can't get their funding. They're continuing in their studies is in doubt. Here we go with Politico of April 3rd. Sequester looms over U.S. energy labs, the national laboratories, right? The Fermi, the Lawrence Livermore, and so forth. They are getting slammed. They are getting cut. And maybe the most dramatic, here we go in the Washington Post of yesterday. Cancer clinics turn away patients because of the sequester. If you're getting chemotherapy for cancer at a Medicare facility, they are turning people away because they say under the sequester, they cannot continue to dispense the expensive drugs. And now people are literally dying, and the fascist Republicans are saying that, oh, no, the sequester has no result. Well, the Satan sandwich is still with us. But now we're honored to be joined by one of the leaders in this fight against austerity and in favor of democracy and values that we've been fighting for here for centuries. I had the chance this week to meet Reverend Edward Pinkney. We were over at the Washington Post and the NAACP in particular protesting the pro-banker, pro-corporate policies of the Ben Jealous leadership of the NAACP. And I know Reverend Pinkney went on then to Baltimore, and I know he wants to tell us something at least about what's going on back in Michigan. So, Reverend, welcome.
Hey, Webster. Hey, I'm happy to be here today.
Great. Now, why don't you go through these items in any way that seems best to you?
Absolutely. Let me start with the Baltimore NAACP National Headquarters. It was tremendous on yesterday. When we got there, they had the whole place taped off like it was a crime scene. The whole place. They taped it off, called themselves going to block us. Then they had the nerve to call the police and say that we was outside picketing in front of the NAACP headquarters. When the police came, they told him that we had every right to be out there, and there's nothing they can do. They were so upset that the expression on their face, and we just got louder. We was chanting Ben Sellers, not jealous. Ben Sellers, not jealous. Ben Sellers. And then we were saying that when we said the NAACP, we said pimp. NAACP, we said pimp. It was so tremendous. We had even people coming from all over. People, Pam Africa was there. They had Sadiq. All these people that wasn't there on Wednesday came, and we needed everybody there to show them that we were serious about what we was doing. It was also, and we got plenty of media coverage. The Real, we got Fox News, we got all the news stations was there, and they did a pretty good job yesterday on the news, but it wasn't, but something is always better than nothing. That's what I tell people. And I think that we did great. I think the media coverage was great, and I think the people there was enthusiastic about being there, and I think what we was doing was tremendous. We had a tremendous day, and I'm so happy that the NAACP when somebody finally showed them and told them that they're out of touch with our community. And that what made it so wonderful. And people said, the news media said that we have made history. They said nobody have ever marched on the national headquarters of the NAACP.
Congratulations, Reverend. Are you back in Michigan now?
I am back in Michigan. I'm at my home. I just arrived. I made sure I'll be home so I can be on your show. That's how I feel.
What does it look like in Michigan?
Well, we're still having the same problem with this emergency financial manager. One of the things, he just laid down the law once again that the elected officials can only have a meeting, they can take the minutes, and then they have to end the minutes. He's telling them that he's in total charge of the situation now. He said, whatever you used to do, you're not going to do it anymore. And he's only 27 years old talking to these elected officials like this. And I tell you, this is one time that we have to stand up. He also made the announcement that Whirlpool had a shopping list of stuff that they want done for the city of Benton Harbor. And I told them, no way. It better go through the commission, the elected officials. And then we'll decide on what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. So I'm really excited. And here's the thing about Detroit now. Detroit got them an emergency financial manager. And this guy has came in and he told the city council, Dave Bing, and the city council that they was going to keep their salaries as long as they play ball with him.
Right.
You see, you're going to be able to keep your salary as long as you don't give me any trouble. But once you start giving me trouble, I'm going to pull your paycheck. And that is what's happening. These people are, you can't believe what's going on, not only in Benton Harbor, but not only in Detroit, but around the whole state and the country. Stockton, California just filed bankruptcy.
Right, and they're the lucky ones because they at least get some relief, right? Detroit should file bankruptcy, but Snyder won't let them.
No, absolutely not, because they may find out that the state owes them money, and they may try to collect it from the state.
Right.
The state owes them millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I just want to say it's time that the people around this country stood up and start fighting back. I'm telling you, if we don't start fighting back before it's too late, everybody's going to be in these concentration camps.
That's creeping fascism. Reverend, you were the one who first told me that guy Kevin Orr, the dictator of Detroit, had 4 liens placed on his house for non-payment of taxes by Bethesda, Maryland, right here close to where I am, and that's now an issue. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, well, absolutely. The word got around that he was look, he needed an emergency financial manager. And look, they bring in the emergency financial manager, and this guy needed one. They found out, according to Snyder said that he had no idea that this man had 4 liens on his house. The free press here in Detroit broke the news to the people. And they said that but they said he had other issues too. It's not just the 4 liens on his home. I believe he's in a money crisis. And that's why his good buddy, Governor Snyder, brought him in so he could pay him $275,000 plus he get room and board, transportation, he get it all. So that is the reason why they brought him in, because he's in a financial crisis.
And, of course, these were taxes. He had servants, right? He had nannies and other people working for him in his house, and he didn't pay the unemployment tax and some other taxes. So
absolutely.
They came after him for 4 years in a row, and he just ignored it. He's a scofflaw.
Right. And he figured he didn't have to pay them. I don't understand what's the thing. How he going to help Detroit? He can't help himself.
That's right. And, well, there are some lawsuits wending their way, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. We on last Thursday, the city of Detroit filed a lawsuit, the Sugar Law Firm, and the ACLU was part of it. They had partnership and filing a lawsuit against not only Snyder, but also the state of Michigan. And in reference to the law itself, they're saying that this law is unconstitutional, and I have to go along with them.
Reverend, one last thing. You had a list of cities that are prime candidates in other states to get the same treatment. Can you just run through that very quickly now at the end?
Well, you know what? It's so many. You got in other states. You got Stanton, New Jersey. Pennsylvania. You got you also got what's this little small town? I can't think of it right now.
Camden, New Jersey, right, suburb of Philadelphia.
Right, you got that one, and there's so many of them. But right now, I can't even think of them. There's so many of them.
Reverend, if you have that, if you send me that, I would be very glad to see such a list, because that would then put people on notice. They're next.
Definitely do that. My voice is going, but I'm still ready to. I'm still fired up.
You shouted yourself hoarse. Well, a great voice and a great cause. That's Reverend Edward Pinkney. See you next week on World Crisis.